I'm so far into the Sony ecosystem that when a new camera gets released or announced, I don't really pay too much attention unless it's Sony. However, there are two camera companies that have piqued my interest very recently. Here's the story. Before I started shooting with Sony, I was a Panasonic user, and I used to shoot with the Panasonic AF100 and also the Panasonic GH4. So these were two different Micro Four Thirds cameras that I used to shoot with and create a lot of content for a few years before eventually upgrading to the Panasonic EVA 1, which was a Super 35 sensor camera, and then eventually jumping ship from Panasonic to Sony and all their full frame goodness when I purchased the Sony FX6 and also the Sony a7S III. But I've also owned a Sony a7 IV, and I also currently own a Sony a7R5, which I'm recording with right now. So when the GH7 was announced, I wasn't too interested in what it could do until I read that it could record 32-bit float audio. And that's one of the features that I've been waiting for Sony to include in its camera system. So when I saw Lumix was doing this with the GH7, it really did pique my interest. And then I started to look at what the camera could do, and I saw that it could record ProRes RAW, which for me, it's a nice party trick, but I won't necessarily be using all the time. But it can shoot open gate, and that is something that I am somewhat interested in trying out because I do shoot a lot of vertical and horizontal content, and having that open gate image would be very helpful for a lot of the social media projects that I'm currently shooting. Also, to be able to record in ARRI log as well was something that is very interesting to me, because when I am color grading my S-Log3 footage, a lot of the time, or pretty much all the time, I'm using Cinematch and I'm converting the S-Log3 image to a ARRI log image using that plugin and then color grading from there, because I really like the colors and look that I can get out of that plugin. So being able to record ARRI log in the GH7 was another thing that I'd be interested in trying out. It is a paid firmware upgrade that you do have to do on top of purchasing the GH7. So I do realize there is a little bit of a gotcha there, but hopefully that is worth the investment. So the GH7 really has got me looking at it going, ooh, shiny new toy, I want to try that out. So who knows, let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in me getting my hands on a GH7 and testing it out and seeing how it really does stack up compared to the Sony cameras that I'm using on a professional basis for all the professional video production jobs that I do. And another camera that has been announced recently is the Canon C400, and that really only piqued my interest in one area, and that was the 3 base ISO, because Sony has a dual base ISO for a lot of their cameras. With the Sony FX6, it is 800 and 12,800, whereas with the Canon C400, it's 800, 3200, and also 12,800. And to me, those are 3 very usable ISO ranges. 800 is great for the majority of work that I do, but then when I find myself going into low light situations, 12,800 sometimes can be a little bit too much depending on what kind of depth of field I want, what lenses I'm using, and obviously the lighting conditions. But having that 3200 ISO would be so much more useful in a lot of the circumstances that I find myself in. So having the option of shooting either 800, 3200 or 12,800 is really beneficial to me, and I never even really thought about that as well. So what's exciting to me about all these recent camera announcements is that we've gotten to a stage in this camera development that a lot of the cameras, if not all the cameras that are being released these days, are all perfectly fine cameras. And of course, there's no perfect camera, but there's always a new camera coming out and you think, well, what else can they do to really make me want to purchase this new camera? And they just keep finding a way to pique people's interest, like myself, and go, ooh, shiny new toy, I want to try that out. So to me, it is quite exciting seeing where we're at with the camera industry right now. And hopefully when Sony releases or announces their next camera, it'll be something that is cutting edge as well, that is pushing the boundaries, that is not just a small incremental change from their previous camera release, but it's something sizable. It's something that will grab our attention as video producers and make our lives easier as well. So having 32-bit float internally, recording internally into a camera, really will make a lot of video producers' lives and content creators' lives easier, because it's one less thing that you have to really dial in and nail to make sure that you've got good usable audio. Obviously, you need to be monitoring your audio. If you've got a lapel mic on someone and it's scratching, it's rubbing up against clothing or whatever, stuff like that, then you're not setting yourself up to win. But not having to worry about levels peaking and being too low or being too hot, you can just record the audio, and then if it's not sounding great, just fix it in post, which is normally a saying that I don't like to hear on set. Oh yeah, we'll fix it in post. Well, no, get it right in production is always the better way to do it. But when you're a solo shooter, having that option of 32-bit float is really helpful. Also, having reliable autofocus is really good as well. And that's hopefully what the GH7 has got as well, now that it's got its phase detect autofocus. So as I said before, who knows, maybe I will get my hands on a GH7, and the studio that is behind me right now is currently affectionately known as Studio Alpha. Who knows, maybe it will get renamed to Studio Lumix. Thanks for watching. And for those wondering, this is my YouTube studio setup today. I've now swapped over to using a Shure SM7B microphone for my audio. I am recording into a Sound Devices MixPre 3, which has 32-bit float audio. I was recording with my Sony A7R5, and that was with the Sony 24-70 G Master 2 lens. My light is the Amaran 60X as well, and that's only at 43%, so plenty of headroom for leftover power, which is great. And I've also got my Atomos Shinobi monitor here, and all that's plugged into power into the wall.